Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. This is Scott Billick from the Winnipeg Sun. Kenny is writing right now. He will be with us in a short amount of time. Until then, we'll handle this. Hey, everyone knows what happened. Let's start the show by saying we wish the best for Jake Evans. That was a terrible scene to watch him on the ice like that, in the rink like this with people in it, Scotty. A hush came over the crowd. I don't think anyone liked seeing that situation. Seeing a guy stretchered off is absolutely terrible. And seeing the reactions of players like Nick Ehlers trying to shield him, knowing, I mean, there's one point I was right in the corner while it was happening. You know, people are talking about Nick Ehlers shielding him, but the concern on his face when you were at the rink and you could see him close up was evident. At some point, he's turning and he's waving people, and he knows that Jake Evans is in trouble. So we just wish Jake Evans all the best and hope for a speedy recovery for him. Let's start it with that. And now that we've started out with that, I want to say something right off the bat here. This is going to get heated. We know it's going to get heated. I know it's going to get heated because of the responses that we're seeing on Twitter and online, and that's fine. We want passionate discourse. We want people to defend their sides. We're totally okay with that. Let's keep it respectable, people here. And people are going to get angry. Yeah. The name calling, all that kind of stuff, drop it. We don't want it here. Let's have a conversation. That said, Scott, we got to get into this. And I won't even start with the game. We got to start with the hit. What was your take on the hit?
Yeah, I'm going to preface this with saying that two things can be true. A player can be a clean player, and a player that's clean can also make a dirty hit or a dangerous hit or whatever. I'm not going to go on a limb, and I'm not going to say that Mark Scheifele's a dangerous player. He never has been. No. I don't think Mark Scheifele's ever even been suspended for anything, and I don't think he's ever hit a guy like that in his whole career. And in 10 years of watching this guy, I've never seen anything like that. But that hit was dirty. I mean, I don't think there's any way around it. People are going to say it's a clean hockey hit. It's not. I think if you slow down that play, and we were watching it while we were waiting to go on live here, there's two things. There's a point where Scheifele almost is reserved right around the hash marks, reserved to the fact that Jake Evans is going to score. Then he almost jolts back into it and then lowers his shoulder and goes into him. Let's not forget, too, this play starts at center ice for Mark Scheifele. He's back checking hard. Fair enough. I mean, there is, there's no reason for him not to do that. But Jake Evans comes around the neck. And the other thing, too, is, and we talked about this, too. I'm not trying to steal your point, Sean, because I know you said it before. But a hit like that, it's a defenseless player. And Jake Evans is making the wraparound, and I know people say, "Oh, you got to keep your head up. You always got, protect yourself." The part of this is the onus is on both players when it comes to a hit. It is on the player that is getting hit, especially sometimes when a guy makes a quick turn into the board and gets drilled from behind. But Matthew Perreault, who delivered a nasty hit one time, said the onus was on him too, to let up a little bit. And there was no reason that Mark Scheifele had to finish that check the way that he did, so violently. And I think that's the big thing here. And that's the other thing. People in chat are also saying that Scheifele, the emotions got the best of him. That, I think, is also true. And I don't think that Mark Scheifele is a dirty player. We have to separate the two here. But Mark Scheifele is also the one that came off a penalty where he was going after Ben Sherratt, a roughing penalty. Mark Scheifele was livid when he went to the penalty box. Very rarely does Mark Scheifele, I mean, he complains, at times about the penalties. Very rarely does he point and scream and yell at a referee like he did after that play. I think this is an instance where Mark Scheifele lost his head a little bit, and it led to something very dangerous happening, very scary situation happening. I don't think that we can mitigate what happened here, because if you watch the video, if you slow it down, there aren't a lot of mitigating factors in Mark Scheifele's defense here. In terms of how many games he might get, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how the league looks at it, because there are times where the league does think that these types of hits are clean. It's weird. I mean, the league is very inconsistent when they when they dole out these sorts of penalties. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was 2 games. I know, Sean, you said earlier, you can dive into this as well, obviously. You said you might be lucky to, 2 games would be kind of best case scenario.
I think if he walked away from this with a 2-game suspension, that the Winnipeg Jets would be dodging a massive bullet. I think, and we have to bring into the factor, and I want to touch on your point at the beginning. Mark Scheifele is not a malicious player. He's not a guy who goes out to injure people. He doesn't have a track record that's going to play in his favor when they look at this. But there is nothing about that hit, and people are going to disagree and they're going to say different things. I'm going to tell you how I see it. There is nothing about that hit that is clean. Everything about that hit is intent to injure. People are saying it's him. I saw someone responded to me on Twitter and said every other play on any other team would have done that to any Jets player. That is a load of BS. I don't buy that for a second. Let's be honest here. And the people who are saying that this is a hockey play, that's a hockey play. In 1996, that was a hockey play. In the days of Scott Stevens, that's a hockey play. Players went out in those days to try and take players out of the series. At some point, that idea, that mindset, the league tried to remove that from the game. It's why players like Nick Ehlers are in the league right now. It's why players like Kyle Connor are in the game right now, because those players can play in this game now because hits like that don't happen anymore. Hits like that aren't supposed to happen. Players coming into the league talk about having more respect for each other. It is, and someone had said it's not the onus on a player who to avoid a player who leaves themselves defenseless. Where have you been? Where does that comment come from? This is entirely where we're at with the league. The players have to take into consideration the safety of the players around them. Josh Evans is in a vulnerable position. Mark Scheifele can choose to either try and knock the puck off. And there's I shared it on my what's his name? Pete Blackburn. Pete Blackburn shared a video. There's a shot of Evans before he shot the puck in the net, and Mark Scheifele is well within stick range of trying to poke check that puck. And he doesn't have his stick out there because he's coiled up and he's ready to launch. And when he launches, he leaves his feet, he follows through. The people who are saying the primary point of contact isn't the head, go back and watch the play from the side, the slow motion view from the side. The immediate point of contact, his head is thrown back into the left. It's a headshot. It is predatory. It is a defenseless player. There is nothing about that play that I believe there's a defense for. And I'll tell you this. I thought Sportsnet did a good job of breaking this down. The panel did afterwards. This is what I thought, Scott. You were talking about how heated he was during the game. When did he get in a scrum and not throw punches all game? Yeah. You know, the one time he did not was after he threw that hit, because he knew he'd done something wrong, and he stood there and he put his hands up and he said, what? But he's not turning around and beating people.
Yeah. I think he almost went into denial right away. Like it was almost like I think he was immediately remorseful, right? Like he didn't throw any punches. He let whoever grab him. Like, I don't think Mark Scheifele walked away from that thinking he just laid a hockey hit, right? Mark Scheifele knows this game just like anybody else, probably more than anybody else. And I don't think Evans is keeping his head up to admiring the goal. He's trying to make a wraparound around the net. I disagree. I mean, you got to keep your eye on that too. I mean, I don't think anybody expected Mark Scheifele to do what he did, and that's kind of part of it, right? Like, when has Mark Scheifele ever done something like that? I mean, you know, here's the thing. Totally. Put Mark Scheifele, put Corey Perry in Mark Scheifele's shoes, and put Mark Scheifele in Jake Evans' shoes. What is the narrative then, you know, going on right now? Is it that Corey Perry blew up Mark Scheifele and that's a perfect hockey hit? I don't think people are saying the same thing. I think it is a definition of a charge. Agreed. I mean, charging doesn't mean you go full steam ahead all the time, skating stride. I mean, charging is you can still glide into a guy and it's considered charging. And I think that's exactly what it was. I mean, I don't – the optics, even if Mark Scheifele didn't intend to injure there and all that, and I don't think Mark Scheifele ever went into that hit trying to put Jake Evans into hospital. But at the same time, it's like the optics are bad. You're down a goal. You're about to go down, by 2 again after you tied it up. Mark Scheifele was mad throughout the game. I mean, Paul Maurice said that he wasn't frustrated, but I mean, yeah, when that hit happened, I mean, the only thing you could hear in here was a needle dropping and a lot of swearing going on. And the Canadiens, I think, had every right to be angry on that one because it's just a blatant bad hit.
Someone had said that it was textbook charging. I'm going to read this because Elliot Friedman tweeted this out before. Rule 42.1, charging shall mean the actions of a player who, as a result of distance traveled, shall violently check an opponent in any manner. A charge may be the result of a check into the boards, into the goal frame, or in open ice. He says that gives the director, the Department of Player Safety, wide latitude on this. I agree with that. He also says, looking at some recent charging suspensions for Soucy, Byron, Jarmelson, Eakin, Shattenkirk, and Barry, none of them came from as far away as Mark Scheifele skated into that play there. Clearly, people are having different opinions. We're okay with that. We don't need to convince anyone of anything. We're just telling everyone what we're seeing here. People are clearly not going to agree. I'm okay with that. We saw what we saw. Now let's get down to the suspension thing. So you're thinking in the area of 2 games. Like I think 2 games is where it starts. And I think they could get away with that. I think he could have a 2-game suspension, just because you know his history is not the history of a player like that. Oh, and I should bring this up because I thought the Sportsnet, I thought the panel did a good job of this, and our technical crew did a good job of this. There's a shot of Mark Scheifele leaving the ice and walking down the tunnel where he kind of turns around, and the look on his face is it's an interesting look on his face. He looks like you could. I'd be reading into it, right? But it looks remorseful. It looks kind of shocked. So and they had said, Cassie Campbell, I thought, did an interesting comment, because Mark Scheifele kind of looks, and then you can see his head peek over to go look and see how Jake Evans is doing on the ice. And she said she thinks that's the moment where it really hits home for Mark Scheifele what's happened here. Not only what the potential for him to be suspended and have that affect this series, but the Jake Evans lying on the ground and the damage that could have been done. Tough situation, but yeah, let's move on, because I'm sure we could talk about this all night, and I'm sure people are going to tell us we're wrong all night, and that's fine.
Here's the thing, guys. Like, I mean, we get it. I mean, there is 2 ways to look at this, right? Like, I think the way that the league's gone, like Sean said, is part of this when it comes into it. These are the types of hits that they don't want. They don't want a guy being knocked out unconscious on any hit, regardless of it, right? I mean, I don't know. It's a tough one. I think player safety is clearly going to be looking at this. And I just think that I think they have to give him at least a game. I mean, I think it's 2 games because of the severity of the injury. I mean, I think that also plays in the fact we know that when a player is injured on a bad hit, that plays significantly into it. But yeah, the Archibald. Yeah, I mean, the Archibald hit. Here's one of the other problems that we have, that you guys would have in the chat, is that you watch these sort of hits happen. You've seen worse hits. You've seen, far less, severe hits. And you've seen, penalties that are wide all over the gamut, right? Like, some guys get 2 games. Some guys like Kadri get 8 games. That's part of the problem too. We don't know exactly how player safety is going to go. And that's it. There's no clear cut, penalty. They look at so many ideas with this. So, well, I mean, the guy's saying no idea what the injury is. I mean, we don't know, but the guy got stretchered off the ice. I mean, you don't usually get stretchered off the ice.
He got knocked out. It's a concussion.
He was knocked out.
He got knocked out. We don't need to guess what the injury is. The guy was out cold on the ice before he hit the ice. It's a concussion. Anytime you lose consciousness, we don't know what grade of concussion it is, but it's clearly a concussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad hit. I mean, the end result is bad. And I think that's part of the problem here too. This is based on what I do for a living, what Sean does for a living. I think you're looking at a couple games. I know Sean thinks it could be more. I think it's only 2. It's the playoffs. Mark Scheifele is not that type of player. I think Mark Scheifele was extremely remorseful later or after it. But again, it's a tough one. For sure, it's a tough one.
You know what we should get into is if we're going to be talking about the potential for suspension and what the league's going to be looking at, was Maurice building the case for him after the game. Basically, because this is what I read about what Elliot Friedman was talking about, the distance he traveled to get there and have that hit happen. Maurice's explanation of that, and it's a true explanation, his explanation of that is that the speed of the hit has to do with the fact that Mark Scheifele is skating as hard as he can to try and stop the goal. So the buildup is I think it's a good point, because Mark Scheifele isn't seeing a player and thinking, I'm going to take a lick on that player, so I'm going to skate as hard as I can to get a lick in on that player. Yeah. He's skating as hard as he can to try and prevent the goal. Now, from what I'm hearing from you and what I believe I saw on that play is at some point he decides he's not going to stop that goal, or he'd rather blow the guy up anyway. And so that to me is, I'm wondering they're going to take into consideration when he started to coil, right? When he started to coil up to throw the hit, they'll take all those kind of things, the position of the stick, an attempt to stop the puck from going in the net rather than hitting a guy who had the puck in front of the net. All those things are going to go into play. But I thought it was interesting. The Jets players, obviously, all they wanted to talk about was how, they wanted to see the best for Jake Evans. Classy for them to do that. Again, I go back to Nick Ehlers, who is an absolute, that's what you want to see on the ice from a hockey player who's
pure class,
forgetting about everything and trying to make sure that guy's okay. But that's Paul Maurice in the media building the case against a long suspension, building a case saying this is a player who is skating fast for one reason and one reason only, and then he ended up throwing a hit. Right now, clearly, he admitted it was a really, really big hit. I don't know if that's admitting anything, but you could tell by the response from the Jets players. No one's defending that hit. There's no one on the Winnipeg Jets who are defending that hit. Everything that we've seen defending that has come from social media. There did not seem to be anyone, and maybe it's happening behind the scenes, but I haven't seen anyone on either of those teams who defended that as a hockey play or anything like that. To me, it seems fairly obvious that the Jets know that something happened that wasn't a good thing. Anyway, Scott, let's move on from that. And let's get into the game. You just give me your breakdown outside of that, how it shook down, what you saw from both these teams.
Yeah, tough first period for the Jets, obviously. I think they got taken advantage of on some opportunities. They weren't able to get their own. Scheifele gets robbed by Carey Price on the power play. That's a big one. Second period, I thought the Jets did better. I think it was pretty even, I think, in the second. And then they make it 3-2, right? they get there, and then, the Scheifele penalty kind of negates all of that kind of momentum, and then they get scored on. But, it was loose, the Jets just felt loose. The tweet and the analysis that I made of it was, it felt far too much regular season type hockey than it did playoff hockey, right?
That comment came in by Paul Maurice, brought the term regular season hockey into
so I think that was kind of the story of the game for me, right? It was a little more wide open. The Jets just weren't playing a tight kind of defensive game that got them through that series. Shea Weber gets a breakaway on a power play. Now, I get it, you're down a man. But when does Shea Weber get in behind everybody and have a breakaway, right? That's a tough one. Jesper Kotkaniemi's on the doorstep on the Petrie thing. Great play, obviously, but why is he there? Who was there to clean up the puck that squirted in between, in behind Connor Hellebuyck on the Weber thing? And the other thing with that, and I'm looking at the ice trying to replay it in my head. I'm wondering, Josh Morrissey makes a pinch and whatever. I don't have an issue with the pinch. He's trying to keep the play alive. My issue is there's nobody else that covers him off to come back, right? The kind of awareness. And so we'll talk about rust versus rest and all that kind of thing. I think the Jets were rested and rusty. And I think I just think Montreal came in and played a game that was indicative of the game that they played in Game 7. It wasn't nearly as intense, I suppose. But I didn't think the Jets didn't really establish a physical presence in the game as much. You lose Dylan DeMello on his first shift of the game. That's a psychological blow, I think, for that team. Adam Lowry takes a puck to the face. He leaves the game. Matthew Perreault leaves the game after blocking a shot. But Paul Maurice said it after the game, or Blake Wheeler, I think it was, said it after the game. They felt they had a good game plan coming into it, and they just didn't execute. And I'm going to give the Jets a benefit of doubt when it comes to game plans. They did it for 4 games, against the Edmonton Oilers, and they were able to execute enough to win those games. I don't think they really did that. Montreal had the rhythm going. And Paul Maurice pointed that out. They just seem to be more in sync. They just played 48 hours ago as well. So we'll see. I mean, if we go back to 2018-19 or 2017-18, the Jets won Game 7 against Nashville, went in to Vegas, win Game 1, and then proceed to lose the next 4 games. So I'm not saying that history is going to repeat itself here the other way around this time, but I don't think after 60 minutes tonight you can write the Jets off. I think the Jets have a lot more in the tank to give. I think the problem is Scheifele's suspension, potentially. Maybe Dylan DeMello's out because we don't know. Where's Paul Stastny going to be? I mean, these are some of the problems that you could have facing you Game 2. And I think that's going to be part of, the problem going forward, at least for Game 2. And then we'll see kind of how it goes from there. But, the Scheifele hit at the end, I know we're trying to talk about the game here, but that does affect the outlook for Games 2 and maybe even Game 3, right? So,
no doubt. You know what? We're going to try and lighten the mood here. We wanted to show off something that one of the people from our chat room, Tristan Rivers, who, if you've heard the Sean's Headband song, he made his own song, and it's awesome. It's my new favorite song, although this one's giving it a run. We were talking about Ken Wiebe coming into the show and that he needed entry music, so Tristan Rivers went to work, and he created that entry music. So here we go. It's Enter Kenny, the hit song by Tristan Rivers. Check this out because it is awesome. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Good evening. That's outstanding work, Tristan. Yes, outstanding work. Outstanding.
That is getting played into a show.
Shotty, put
right
mute
now.
on, buddy. Put the mute on.
Oh my goodness!
Great reaction.
My goodness! This was
Just
great.
in time for the ice to be worked on.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And I'm not let me turn my mic. Yes, I'm audio. Okay. What I love about it is it's like the chat room. He's taken the chat room and he's made a song out of it. The happy birthday reference is in there. You telling Huss to shut up when it was you playing Huss's show in your computer. It's you drinking the water bottle. I mean, like Kenny's water bottle, who's always so active in our chat room. Just absolutely phenomenal stuff. Tristan, you are the man. I'm loving this stuff. It's absolutely great. Bringing Kenny into the show. I love it. And we'll circle back on it because we've talked about it at the beginning and we beat up on it.
Sure.
And we're going to give you your say. We'll do it at a later time because I just want to kind of carry some of this positive momentum forward. What did you take away from that first game?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jets were quite flat, and I'm going to tip my cap to Scott Billeck, who told me that was a concern going into into this series. I told him that I didn't think it was as big a deal during the playoffs because there was no travel involved, but the Jets were flat. The Jets were unable to do all of the things that they did so efficiently and effectively against the Edmonton Oilers. They were unable to exude the patience that they talked about with frequency, right? All we heard about was patience, can't feed into the transition game. Well, what did we see throughout most of that first period? Odd man rushes and poor puck management. I mean, you understand that yeah, these things can happen, but those are things the Jets have to clean up. We know exactly what they need to do to clean up, and I think if you're the Winnipeg Jets, if you're Paul Maurice, it's just a reminder. I don't think the game plan was flawed one bit, but the Jets simply did not execute at all. And if I would have told you guys going into this game that the Jets would score 3 times on Carey Price, you would have probably thought it was enough, right? Based on how we played against Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
But they were too loose defensively, and I'm not putting this on Connor Hellebuyck by any stretch. What do you expect him to do on those 2 backdoor tap-ins? One perfect slap pass by Jeff Petrie to Jesperi Kotkaniemi. The play, just complete discombobulation on the Eric Stahl goal in terms of the defensive zone issues that were happening there.
On the Suzuki goal, man. Unbelievable.
Right. I mean, it's a great play, but I mean that's something that was an issue in the game. The Jets found their offensive game as they went along, but outside of the Mark Scheifele line, they did not generate nearly enough. Yes, great play by Matthew Perreault, creating the chaos along the boards, winning a puck battle, getting the puck to Dubois for the Forbert goal, but they just were not able to generate enough at 5-on-5. We constantly saw the Canadiens in a very good defensive position, and they just didn't give up much. Sorry, guys, I know that is a classic Les Nessman. It's just because of the machine on the ice that's behind us. I would not have the big bubble on here, but it has to be on to sort of mute out some of the sound.
Don't apologize, Ken. It looks great. It looks awesome. Don't let the chat room get to you, Kenny. Don't let it happen. Hey, I thought for me, they talked about in the series, it was going to be important to get traffic in front of these goaltenders. 2 great goaltenders.
Sure.
You were going to need to take away their eyes. That first period is an example of the Canadiens just getting to the net over and over and over and over again. Where did the Jets go wrong in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there was not enough boxing out being done, but it was more, like I mentioned, I mean, losing Dylan DeMello, I know Scott touched on it while I was writing there, losing DeMello sort of just created some mayhem that we didn't see that often in the first round. You had different partners out of the gate. You had Morrissey bouncing now back again from the right side to the left side and back and forth, and their positioning was just not there, and it just wasn't there. I don't think that it took. Sean, we often talk about this. I think the Jets didn't have as much trouble getting their legs up to speed, but they had trouble processing the game quickly enough in those areas that they were so good at in the first round. And that's something that I know we talked about rest versus rust, and some people didn't buy it, whatever. But here's the thing. The rest factor will be more of an issue as we move forward with 3 games coming up in a 4-day span. Yes, the Canadiens did a great job going out on the road, carrying the momentum over in with a Game 1 victory. Yeah, and they'll put their feet up tomorrow and they'll do a lot of video work, probably stay off the ice. But when it comes to what is ahead, Friday, Sunday, Monday, that's when the Jets could really lean on the rest.
Yeah.
However, having said that, we don't know the status of Dylan DeMello. It didn't look good. I mean, I'm not a doctor. Kevin Bieksa is a guy who played the game at a high level, knows a lot about high ankle sprains and what they look like. He mentioned the possibility of that. And if that's the case, I mean, Dylan DeMello's gone for probably 6 to 8 weeks minimum, right? I mean, that would be a humongous blow for the Winnipeg Jets back end. And in terms of up front, I mean, Scheifele could be gone too. I would expect Paul Stastny will be back. You know that he wants to be in there if he can. Obviously, he has an issue with his body that it didn't happen in practice. It didn't happen in a game. So that's a 35-year-old body issue. So I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we forget maybe we shouldn't forget. I know that from playing slow pitch and stuff like that, when you get older, you go out. When you're younger, you do what you do. Then you go out when you're older and you start getting those tweaks. This is a guy. And I wonder if there was maybe a little bit of a hint to that or a tip of the cap to that. I believe you referred to this at the beginning in our pregame show. Paul Maurice had talked about, the thousands of practices that he'd been through and, 1,000 games and all those things. This is a body that has been through a lot, and you've got to expect every once in a while an older body that's been through a lot breaks down. That's what I take away from what's happening here, but good to hear post-game
Paul Maurice says it's a day-to-day issue and something that could clear up at any point.
Yeah, and he's a durable guy, right? He played every game this year, and I mean, he's been a durable guy throughout the course of his career. And we all know that if Paul Stastny could have played, he would be in the lineup. I mean, nobody wants to be in there more than Paul Stastny. He cherishes these opportunities, so I would expect we'll see him. I mean, Sean, you and I were talking about this off air. I mean, now the question becomes: it could be a great opportunity to reunite Stastny with Nikolai Ehlers and Andrew Kopp, and maybe you see Pierre-Luc Dubois move up with Kyle Connor and Blake Wheeler, who we know he has some chemistry with and has played with both of those guys at different times on separate lines. But
Wheeler gets Dubois. Wheeler gets him, understands him, knows where he is on the ice, knows how to get the puck to him. That it was our conversation we had, but that's, I think, what I would expect is to see Dubois move up into that role, and if Stastny's back, have him on that line that fit right in where they were tonight. And that's I mean, I'd seen some analytics suggesting that was one of the best lines in the league this year. I know that I've been beating the drum as loud as I can for the entire year. I think that's been the Jets' best line at any point in the season, although I would couch that by saying I thought, tonight and in the past series, I thought that Jets top line was great. I mean, how many times tonight did on 5-on-5 did Wheeler and Scheifele and Connor look like they were on a power play? They were phenomenal.
Yeah, they had really great zone time, and they did a great job of generating. The other part, too, it's funny. I mean, Scott and I were just talking. It was kind of a quiet game for Dubois up until the point that he got his assist. I think he was engaged physically, but there wasn't a lot happening for that line. Nikolai Ehlers, it's funny. I thought that Ehlers would benefit so much from that extra time. I would say it didn't benefit him as much as I thought. And we know that it's impossible to be in game shape without playing games. I thought that was fairly evident. There was obviously effort. That there's rarely a lack of effort with Nikolai Ehlers. He just wasn't able to get offense generated with his speed, and the chemistry wasn't there as often as we've seen it in the past. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, could other guys be coming into the lineup? I mean, is it Heinola? Is it Ben up front? I mean, we expect Stastny, but I mean, let's see what happens.
Yeah, no flute at the rink, boys. That's the other part. No flute at the rinks here.
Scott, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dubois would go up. Like Kenny said, I think we have to start talking about that. I think you have to prepare for the fact that Scheifele's probably going to miss at least one game. And so if that's the case, I mean, I think Dubois needs to go up. I think, you could have an added element of, I don't want to say responsibility or just kind of a kick in the pants for Dubois. I thought Dubois, me and Kenny talked about during the game, he was kind of invisible for a little bit. The pass he made to Derek Forbort was really nice. I mean,
really good.
And I think, that there is that kind of flash of his skill, that he has that vision. I think Blake Wheeler could probably, carry him along a little bit. I don't want to say hold his hand. That's kind of a disrespectful thing to say when you're talking about hockey players, but I think there's just an element there.
I don't think it's that disrespectful.
No,
he's
but
a young guy making his way in the NHL. I know what you're saying.
I don't.
The intent of what you're saying, I think, makes sense.
Yeah, I think Blake Wheeler could help a guy like him out, right? Blake Wheeler, as we know in these playoffs, has been a driver, right? For a large part of that first round, he drove that first line, and so I think he can help Pierre-Luc Dubois kind of get into that game, that mentality, that sort of thing. If Paul Stastny comes back, he fits right into that second line center spot. And then you don't really have to worry about the rest of it, right? Adam Lowry plays. And then you have a decision whether it's Vesalainen or Harkins. I think Vesalainen gets the edge because he's already played in the playoffs. So I think that might be part of it and played, a bit down the stretch. Or did he play in the first round? He did, didn't he?
He played
first game. But so I think he goes to that. I think Dominic Toninato, obviously, he stays in the lineup. I think, you get the free Villy hashtag going if
right.
Dylan DeMello is out, of course. But maybe it is Jordy Ben. I don't know, right? Jordy Ben knows this team a little bit more than Ville Heinola does, right? So I could see Paul Maurice. This isn't going to be popular, but I can see Paul Maurice potentially going to Jordy Ben, partly because Jordy Ben can play on the right side. I don't know if Jordy Ben is the right option. I mean, I'm never going to say he's better than Ville Heinola. I think Ville Heinola has shown that he can play with Josh Morrissey. Are you going to put Ville Heinola into a top pairing role with Josh Morrissey in Game 2 of the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs? That's my only knowing what we know about Paul Maurice, I just don't know if that's an option that we can really consider. I think that's kind of the problem there, and that's why I would lean towards Ben coming in, because Ben's done this before. It's hard for me even to say that, because I think Ville Heinola is the right play, but at the same time, I think my head, knowing what Paul Maurice does, puts Ben into that role. And then who knows, maybe you put Tucker Pullman back up. I saw one comment earlier here. I'll just touch on it. Logan Stanley probably didn't have his best game tonight. I would agree. I think he needed to be more aware on Shea Weber. Well, it was Gallagher's goal, I guess, who poked it in ever. But, that's a tough one too, because, you're kind of left all alone, and they're all chasing it, right? And so that's a problem where, Logan Stanley's probably got to be more aware on that too. But, I think it's either Tucker Pullman moves up, or you play Jordy Ben in that spot and see how it goes. But yeah, that's kind of it's not ideal any way you kind of look at it.
Well, hey, hold on, we'll get to that. I want to get to that specific question right there, Ken. But isn't Stanley's game tonight kind of exactly what Paul Maurice was guarding against this entire year? Like, I thought, other than a couple of those plays where he got caught, I thought Logan Stanley had a really good game in the ice time that he carried in a lot of the plays that he was making. I thought earlier in the game, when he kind of threw a little bit of an elbow, got away with an elbow on one of the other teams. When he does that kind of stuff and when he does that stuff, and exactly, on Corey Perry on that goal, when he does that kind of stuff, he gets under the other team's skin, right? We talked about Josh Archibald. I think Josh Archibald's hit on him that opened the door and, to me, entirely changed that series is because of the way that Logan Stanley is playing earlier on. You saw Weber got entirely incensed at him, went over at him, was jawing at him, and then I think following that elbow of his, the Canadiens, I believe it's Kotkaniemi, took an elbowing penalty earlier on, right, that I thought was a direct link to Stanley playing like that. I think Stanley does a really, really good job and plays a really, really good role at taking the other team off their game, enraging them, and kind of taking them out of themselves. But a rookie is going to make a few mistakes here and there, right? And so, I take a look at his game tonight, and I think, if you were Paul Maurice, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a Jordy Ben, who you think is going to be, really steady? He's not going to give you the highs that a guy like Logan Stanley is going to, but he's probably not going to get caught on those, major exposed plays. Would you agree with that, Ken?
Yeah, I think that Stanley brings an element that the Jets need in the lineup in terms of the physical nature, but he's also a good puck mover, and that's the biggest thing now, guys. If Dylan DeMello is out, he is one of the most important puck movers on the back end. Yeah. And to me, the decision will come down to where you plan to use the pairings. I thought that somebody asked about Morrissey. I'll get to that in a minute. But to me, if you're going to play Josh Morrissey with Neil Pionk, which is what we saw, but that was more a matter of the Jets chasing the game. If the Jets are going to play Morrissey with Pionk, then you can decide whatever you want. Then it's probably likely that you'll see a Jordy Ben in there with Forbert, or you see Pullman move up, and then you see Ben with Stanley. But if you're going to keep the distribution of the pairings in terms of having the balance, and Pionk plays on the second pairing, then I think you have to give consideration to Heinola because of his puck-moving abilities. Yeah. Are there some risks involved with that? Sure. But there are also risks involved with not being able to move the puck quickly enough. The exits for the Jets against Edmonton were pivotal. So that's where Heinola would have an edge. But obviously Ben has an edge in terms of experience. He'd be familiar with the Canadiens. He's a big, strong guy. In a game where you're anticipating there being some level of pushback or retribution, it is also more likely that Jordy Ben is in and they don't quite reach the emergency break glass.
Yeah, I don't think Logan Stanley's coming out of the lineup. Just to be clear.
That's not what I'm saying.
No.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think any of us.
I just saw a comment on here, and I don't want to think that he's coming out of the lineup. I think it's between Heinola and Ben for DeMello's spot in the lineup. But anyways, yeah.
Again, hold on. But there is an outside possibility. If, because Heinola has been working with Ben in practice, I guess you could see the possibility of having those guys come in as a pairing. Scotty, quit banging your headphones.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
What am I talking? No, come on.
Yes.
All right.
You push rewind, it's making a clicking sound.
Let's
Okay,
not
sorry.
push rewind. Let's move it along.
The beauty of live radio.
It's not a pen. I don't have a pen. But yeah.
Go on. You were making a point, Ken, or were you done?
No, I just think it's possible that maybe you see them come in as a pairing together, but I don't think that that's a likely outcome. I think you'll see one of Heinola or Ben, and I don't think we've quite reached the if in case of emergency break glass, which is why I'm with Scott. I think that it's more likely to be Ben, but if the Jets are going to use the bounce and if they want to use the puck-moving element to try to enhance their offensive game, which was out of sync for all lines except for the Scheifele line, as you mentioned. I think that's probably what we'll see. I mean, I have no problem if Ville Heinola gets into the lineup. I think his skill set would be well suited to this series in a lot of regards. But I think it's more likely that Heinola is ready to play on the third pairing than the top pairing. So. And I don't see him playing on the third pairing with Logan Stanley, which was my point about the potential to see Ben and Heinola enter together. But I totally agree. I think that Stanley's physical nature is something that the Jets need to keep in the lineup at this stage, especially given what happened at the end of the game.
Scotty, you just got slaughtered in the chat room.
I know. I didn't think I was clicking. Like, I don't have a pen.
I wasn't keeping up, but it was like people were screaming at you to stop doing that. That's funny. Heinola burning a year. How big of a factor do you think that plays, Ken? Because I mean, I know what you're talking about, and I think Ben is an option, but I'm starting to wonder how much more he is the primary option because of that fact that what is it? 2 more games? If Heinola plays 2 more games, he burns a year.
I think so.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean,
I'm fairly certain that's what it is.
But if you're worried about that in round 2 of the playoffs, when you're trying to win a series and you think you can go to the conference finals, you can't.
Think it's an issue.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue yet. I think you can't look at it that way at this point. I think you could have done that in the regular season, but we're after 1 game here. And you think Ville Heinola makes your team better, you have to play him. But regardless if it burns a year or not, this is about winning, not about trying to maintain 1 extra year on his ELC. I mean, I get it, but are we really?
I don't think there is anything that Kevin Cheveldayoff values more than team control.
But if that's
I don't think there's anything. I don't think they make those decisions lightly at all.
But if that's the case, you have to
hang on. With an injury, with an injury, and 4 wins away from a conference final, I think it's something that would be reinvestigated, if you will.
I think if that's the case, I mean, if you're going to do that in the playoffs, and your GM is going to make that decision based on that. Yeah, that's a tough road, because if that's the GM's move, and I'm not saying this is what Kevin Cheveldayoff is going to do, but if that's the move and they lose, because I'm not saying they're going to lose, win, it hinges on Ville Heinola being in the lineup, but I mean that's a time when you got to start looking at who's your GM then. I mean, again, I'm not trying to say that Cheveldayoff's doing that, but when you're putting winning or an ELC over winning a series in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I mean, yeah, you got to. I mean, that's a wake up there. I think from McKinney. I think for me, that's a wake up. I'll say that. I mean, I think that is a completely wrong move to do something like that.
Well, I'll tell you this. This is why I think it's important. I think that Kevin Cheveldayoff does an absolutely phenomenal job when he has team control of creating like the future for these players. I think it's why the Jacob Trouba process was important, right? Because Jacob Trouba didn't want to be here, but what he was held up as and shown was, we will keep you here to the point that we will risk maybe getting not as much for you as we should. Now, they end up getting the pick that's Heinola out of it, and they get Neil Pionk, which turned out great. Give Kevin Cheveldayoff credit for doing what he did there. But the fact of the matter is, Jacob Trouba wanted out. He wanted out early, and he traveled a really, really long road to get there. And most importantly is that road, he ended up getting paid in the end, but that road made him poorer in the meantime. And so if you can hold that team control, let's take Pierre-Luc Dubois, for example. Pierre-Luc Dubois, after this year, will have 3 years of team control. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know that he's basically put his best foot forward here with the Winnipeg Jets. So I don't know how eager his representatives are going to be to try and negotiate a long-term contract with the Jets. unless the Jets are willing to overpay him over and above what his performance was this year. So that 1 year goes by. If he's not signing a long-term deal, then you're down to 2 years. It gets closer and closer. But if you take a look at players like Nick Ehlers and Kyle Connor, and I'd say those are players that found a place here, liked their place here. I'm not saying this is the only reason they stayed. But as a GM, if you're saying, I can pay you right now, and you can make a lot of money over your next 6-7 years and stick around with us and be in a place where you can play really, really well and have real talent around you if you sign on the dotted line right now. Or you can go to arbitration time and time again. You can eke out as much money as you can make through this, and you're going to lose money in the meantime. So that's why I think that kind of stuff is important. The longer that you have team control of Ville Heinola, the longer you can say it makes more sense for you to stay here long term, and you turn a guy who's just trying to either force his way out of town or just trying to last until his 7th year of his contract into a guy who ends up being here for 13 or 14 years. That's why I think that's important.
But what, I mean, is this even comparable to Jacob Trouba? Like, I guess that's, I mean, we're talking about like one really extreme case and a guy who's shown none of that, right? Like Ville Heinola.
I'm just saying, if you end up in a place where a player wants to leave town or is trying to get out as quick as they can, that's your option in most cases. The only guy who's really forced his way out of town was Patrick Laine, right? And they made it so unbearable in the media to finally have that move. And I guess you can throw Jack Roslovic into that list, right? So those are two guys who made their way out of town. But Jack Roslovic, in the meantime, felt like he missed out on opportunity, wasn't getting paid, while guys he played with in junior, like Tkachuk and Austin Matthews, are making scads of money, and he's trying to eke out, $1.5 million or whatever. Having that team control allows you to keep control of your cap. It allows you to keep money down, and it allows you to leverage guys into staying around long term. Who does that better than Kevin Cheveldayoff? It's one of the reasons he does that well, is because he guards team control the way that he does.
Yeah, but it's one of the reasons why they've never gotten anywhere either, right? Like,
you're
saying,
totally right. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Like, here's the thing. Like, at what point does Kevin Cheveldayoff, I mean, if we're going to go down this road, at what point does Kevin Cheveldayoff have to take the risk of losing 1 year of team control or whatever and playing the best player that he can in a situation that calls for it? This is the playoffs, not game 13 of the season. Right, like, I mean,
what role are we using Ville Heinola in? Right, this isn't Cale Makar coming into the playoffs and being almost your number one guy, right?
Sure.
It all depends how you're going to use him. So the question has to go to Paul Maurice: how are you going to use the guy? Right. If you're going to use him as a third line option, then maybe we'll put Jordy Ben in there, right? But if you're going to take him out and say Dylan DeMello's out, and the best option we have is to put him up with Josh Morrissey, and Ken, I want to talk to you about what you thought of Josh Morrissey tonight when we get there. But if that's your option, you're going to move that guy to that top line, and you think that that's what can turn the series, then you get that. But that's the question. Do we think that he's at that stage yet? From what we've seen from Ville Heinola, is he a guy who's going to come and turn this series? Because if what you get out of him is here and what you get out of Ben is here, then is that worth blowing a year of team control? That's the question.
I think the problem is that, okay, so here's the thing. We have a small sample size of what Ville Heinola does on the ice. We know he's good. We know he can play well. His best game this season, and Josh Morrissey's arguably best game in the regular season, was when Josh Morrissey was paired with Ville Heinola against the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? So if we're going to look at one game to say this is what can be possible, and the way that the Jets played in that game, and the way that they won, and the way that Morrissey and Heinola both defended and played a part in that game, I mean, if that's what it is, if that's what Ville Heinola is going to give you, then yeah, you put him on the top pairing if Dylan DeMello is going to be out for 6. Well, who knows, right? We don't know what the injury is yet. And we're never going to know how long he's going to be out, I don't think, until who knows, right? But I think you'll also know by who comes into the lineup, too, about how bad the Dylan DeMello injury is, too. There will be a tell there as well. But At the same time, okay, so here's the other thing, too. If Dylan DeMello is out and you have 2 games left, put Ville Heinola in for 1 game with Josh Morrissey and see how it goes, because you still have that buffer. Well, you have a 2-game buffer zone, I guess, right? 2 games that he can play before it kicks in. I don't know the exact, because I just don't have it in front of me.
I think if he plays 2 more games, it's burned.
Seven total. right? And someone asked, Mark, yes, we are sure. This is the same thing that happened with Sam Bennett when he went back to junior and then he played playoff games. Those games in the playoffs count. It's been prorated.
Yeah.
Normally it would be on the 10th game. Now it's on the 7th game, I believe.
So that's the thing. It's been prorated because of the shortened
56
season.
game
Exactly.
season.
Okay.
That's what
So I think you have a 1 game buffer, then let Ville Heinola come in, put him with Josh, and see how it goes. Because, I mean, at that point, you're either putting Tucker Pullman up there, which you know hasn't really worked that well, or you're putting Jordy Ben in there, and it's an unknown. I think what we do know is that Josh Morris played well with Ville Heinola in the limited amount of time that he played. I think you do that for 1 game and see how it goes. You still want that puck-moving defenseman. I think Josh Morrissey plays a better defensive game with Ville Heinola. I think there's a lot of things that you can take out of that pairing and try it for 1 game. And with the possibility that Scheifele's out, maybe Stasny's out, I mean, I think you have to take a risk like that.
Kenny, what did you think of Josh Morrissey's game? And your namesake here, what do you think of this question? If the Jets lose DeMello, do they also lose good Morrissey? Because we sure were patting that pairing on the back the way they came together in that first series.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Josh played as well as he did in the first series. I don't think that he had a rough outing. Obviously, on the goal, I think when there was a pinch there, obviously, but I mean that was emblematic of, Scott, you used the term regular season. So the Jets were in this reminded me of a game against Edmonton where the Jets top line was in the offensive zone for almost a minute-long shift.
Yeah.
Subtle play by Edmondson, gets it passed on the boards to Suzuki, and in a time where the Jets had battled back to 2-1, and if they get out of the first period only down a goal, they're probably thinking this is a great outcome. Now all of a sudden they're down 2 again. So I thought that Morrissey, like I said earlier, when Morrissey was with Neil Pionk, I thought that pairing looked excellent. I thought that the bouncing around you can't get around bouncing around partners when you're down to 5D and chasing the game.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it didn't look smooth with Pullman. I mean, some people were on Morrissey for the first goal. Well, I'm sorry, that the right shot defenseman has to have Kotkaniemi coming off the boards. That's nothing to do with Josh Morrissey. So, yeah, I mean, did he play at an exceptional elite level today? No, but I mean, Morrissey was involved in the game. I don't think any of the Jets defensemen played great, but at the same time, I don't think they played terrible, and I don't think the Jets would lose good Morrissey if DeMello is out. But there is obviously pressure when you lose a partner. We know Josh is most comfortable with Dylan DeMello. That's obvious. We've seen that. If the Jets are willing to go Pionk and Morrissey, those guys had success late in the year. But as Paul Maurice mentioned, and as all 3 of us know, if the Jets load up on their top pairing, now there are a lot of minutes to be distributed between Forbort, Pullman, Stanley, and whoever comes in. The one other thing that I just want to touch on this last part when it comes to who's maybe in first, Paul Maurice provided a tell on that front also. We know that Jordy Ben is more comfortable on the right side versus the left side when it comes to Ville Heinola. We know Ben is more comfortable there. We know that Ben's numbers on the right side, whether it was playing with Quinn Hughes or with the Jets, were better. So that may also be a determining factor, unless you're comfortable putting Josh on the right side and playing him with Heinola.
Well, here's something. Derek Forbort and how he played down the stretch. It's not that long ago, so people should remember. A lot of them were commenting about it in our chat room about Derek Forbort looking tired down the last 10 games of the season or so. Paul Maurice was asked about it, admitted that he wasn't playing his best hockey. And you're talking about tells, Ken. One of his tells, an obvious tell to me, was he had essentially said that Derek Forbort getting with Neil Pionk puts the structure in Derek Forbort's game. Does that take away the option of putting Morrissey with Pionk, except in very limited situations?
I mean, it doesn't take it away, but then you're also more likely to see what those pairings from Cartoon John are. I think that then you'd probably have, I mean, I think one of the other possibilities is Forbort and Pullman. We know they kill penalties together at times. You would have the 2 big guys. Pullman's pretty mobile. He can get back to pucks quickly. Then you also have Ben with Stanley. I think that is the more likely outcome in terms of how the pairings would be distributed. But, I mean, again, Forbort is a guy who would maybe be comfortable with Jordy Ben also. It's really hard to get inside the mind of the coach right now. We know they're not going to share a lot of information because of the competitive advantage element. And Scott's also right. I mean, if the Jets are without Scheifele, if the Jets are potentially without Stastny again, now you might have to think about generating some offense from your defense, which means you may see Pionk with Morrissey, and then you may also see Heinola enter the game. But the other part of that too, I mean, I just think that it's going to be interesting. I don't know that Paul Maurice would be comfortable putting Heinola in because of the potential ramifications and repercussions relating to what happened on the Mark Scheifele play. So if the Jets put in Ville Heinola in game, I'm not saying he won't play in the series. I think if the Jets, depending on how long this goes on, we could see Heinola, but I would be leaning towards the Jets likely putting in Jordy Ben for a lot of the reasons we have discussed. But I'm not ruling out Heinola in this series because I think that if DeMello is out for the series and long term, the Jets will want that puck moving element at some point.
Guys, I want to talk about Connor Hellebuyck. I thought he said the most interesting thing that I heard in the post game when he was asked to comment on Carey Price across the ice, and his response was that he doesn't want to and isn't going to in this series talk about the goaltender at the other end of the ice. For me, I thought that was a really big moment because it brought me back to Vegas, and it brought me back to him calling Marc-Andre Fleury lucky in that series. To me, that response, how he handled it, how he's basically focused intrinsically on the team, was a massive, massive sign of growth. Because Ken, you and I had this conversation before, and I think I definitely felt more strongly about you than this, but I have felt in the past that Connor Hellebuyck, was it last year against Calgary where he said those guys are in trouble or something like that, or was that
down 2-1? He said those guys are in trouble now. Like
those
have
guys
to play a perfect game in order to beat me now.
And I had thought there were too many scenarios and too many situations where Connor Hellebuyck provided the other team with bulletin board material, and in Vegas I thought it was just dangerous. It's like you're going to call out and try and detract from the best player in that series who was keeping them in. Like, it didn't make sense at the time. I remember being in that scrum. Ken, I remember you being there, and I remember, like, I don't know if you saw me, but he said it, and it was one of those times where someone says something, you kind of give the look like, did he just say that, right? So for me, I thought it was important. It shows a lot of growth in him that he hasn't gone down that road, that he knows not to go down that road. Ken, what did you take away from his play tonight, and what do you expect from him bounce back?
Yeah, first and foremost, tremendous growth and leadership. That's a word that we don't talk about enough when it comes to Hellebuyck. He has become an important leader on this team. Back to the 2018 series, I mean, there were at least 4 or 5 experienced journalists that looked at each other and were like, they were immediately thinking of 2011 when Roberto Luongo basically went up and said he couldn't believe Tim Thomas wasn't pumping his tires or whatever. That you guys know exactly what storyline I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
And to me, this shows the maturity of Hellebuyck and not wanting to get involved. I wrote about it in my column. I said this is how I described it. There's nothing to be gained from Connor Hellebuyck talking about Carey Price. We know that Connor Hellebuyck respects Carey Price, but if he doesn't compliment him enough, then it's not enough. If he compliments him too much, then he gets in the heads of his own teammates. Like, there's nothing to be gained. His job is not to critique or discuss the play of Carey Price. His job is to protect his own crease, his own net, and he said it perfectly. My job is to focus on what's happening at my end of the ice, not at the other end.
Yeah, I agree. And the lawnmower going on the ice, I don't know if fans can see it, but it's that John Deere.
It spreads a fine mist of, that was interesting. When they came into town in 2015 and were building the ice at Bomber Stadium, it's interesting. They go and they basically once an hour just go over the ice and spray a fine mist, and what you do is you create layer after layer after layer after layer of ice, and that's how you get really strong ice. People who do backyard rinks and pour it all in one shot and then get those gigantic cracks in the middle of them that they never fix. That's why, because you need to pour them in a bunch of different levels. But Scott, finish up. Just give me your take on Connor Hellebuyck.
I think tonight was his test, right? After post game, and you guys had talked about it. I know I had talked about it too. I mean, the test of maturity. Because we didn't see it. There was no lot. The Jets didn't lose in round 1, so we didn't know how Connor Hellebuyck would react. And I'm not saying there was any goals on Connor Hellebuyck tonight, I mean, even the breakaway one, I think he thought he had it. Obviously, he didn't. But I don't think that's on Hellebuyck either. I think that Connor Hellebuyck showed his maturity tonight, and you guys have said it. So I'm not really adding much new to this, except for the fact that there was a test to be had after this game for Connor Hellebuyck coming out, and he was kind of put on the spot with the Carey Price question. It was the last question of the thing, and he paused there and thought about it, right? And I think that's the other thing. He thought about it. He didn't just, go into something and say whatever was on the top of the head. It was a measured response. And even during it, he said, and I have the quote right here, this is going to be a hard series, and I don't really care about what's going on down there, referring to, Carey Price's L. I think he realizes that it's one game. He probably wants some of those goals back, even though I don't think any of them were literally his fault. I just think that he knows he's learned from it. Let's not even just talk about how he played on the ice during that Vegas series. The things that he said, right? There's a maturity process that mentally and physically and all those types of things when you go through a playoff series like that. I'm sure he's been told about those comments, or at least he knows. I think that, again, like I said, I'm not adding much, but because I agree with Ken and Sean here, it was just a more mature, measured response from Connor Hellebuyck tonight. I also expect you're going to see a bit of an uptick in his play. Again, I think, I don't want to say he got used to them playing a little better defensively in front of him, because we didn't see a lot of these kind of high danger type shots in that first series, right? I don't think we're going to see a lot of those anymore either going forward. I think the Jets are going to tighten up a little bit. But I think Connor Hellebuyck it was a game. Maybe it's part of it too. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck, and we talked about this before, Kenny. Connor Hellebuyck likes playing a lot of games. There's a reason why he played 45 games this season in a 56. He played, almost 85% of the games. It is a rhythm, right? When Connor Hellebuyck doesn't play for 9 games, that's a tough thing to do for any starting goaltender. And I don't think he was really necessarily off his game tonight. But at the same time, I know he thinks that he can play better, and I expect a better outing come Friday night here.
Agreed. And I just want to jump in. Sorry, I expect him to be excellent now that the series gets into a rhythm with three games over the next 4 days. And in terms of Kyle Connor, I thought that was an absolutely critical goal for him, not just because it pulled the Jets within one, it was because he got rewarded on a night where he had a couple of golden opportunities from the slot and was robbed by Price. So for him to take that, we talked about Ehlers not having a big impact at 5-on-5. That is an elite cross-ice pass that he makes by looking off the defender, putting it right in the wheelhouse for the one-timer. I mean, that play is absolutely exceptional. So that's something Ehlers will be able to build off. Dubois makes the play. Matthew Perreault winning the battle along the boards. Connor scoring. I mean, these are all things that the Jets... Blake Wheeler is...
I was just going to say...
But those aren't hollow words.
But it was truthful, right?
It was truthful, exactly. He wasn't making, the Jets played terrible and he said they're playing great. I mean, he said something that was true. I mean, that top line generated enough. We didn't see enough from the other guys. It was such a weird game. I mean, this was snapshot of the Jets game here. Adam Lowry, one of their most important players, while on the bench, gets nailed in the ear by a pass that gets redirected. I mean, that's the way their night went. One of their best defensemen is out 29 seconds into the game. You get a puck in the ear. Matthew Perreault blocks a slap shot from Shea Weber. Fortunate to come back into the game. I mean, that's just it just was the way it was for them. So this is one game. I'm not surprised the Jets weren't sharper. I mean, we saw the opposite of this in 2018. We saw the Jets completely build and win a game on complete momentum. We also saw they ran out of gas over the next 4 nights. So I'm not saying the Canadiens are going to roll over, because they're not. But to think that the Jets are somehow out of it because they didn't take advantage of the rest factor, forget it. Don't buy that for 1 second.
I don't think people are thinking
some people
it's over because of that. I think people are worried about Dylan DeMello being out, what they saw, the Jets' response to having him out, and what may happen to Mark Scheifele. I think that's what... And I think the other part of it is, and the Jets tried to make sure they brought it up and gave them credit for it, the Habs looked good tonight. The Habs looked confident. They looked on their game. They look like they know exactly who they are, exactly how they need to play. They didn't look overheaded at any moment in that game. I thought, when the Jets score to make it a 1-goal game towards the end there, I was watching their bench. They didn't look like a team that was thinking, oh man, here we go. It's a formidable opponent. And so I understand people being a little bit worried, one, because you got to give the Habs credit and you got to expect that they're going to keep playing like that. But two, with the loss of different players, especially Mark Scheifele and what can happen with that, and not knowing what's happening with Stastny, that could be a crazy situation. I wanted to shout out to Thomas Mitchell, who talked earlier about Corey Perry. That's a really good point. I mean, how long did he go in the season without scoring a goal? And now all of a sudden, look at all the key plays he's had in that Toronto series. He's already making his mark here. We got to get this closed out, but Ken, we got to allow you to talk about, we're going to bring it back to where we started, the Mark Scheifele play. Give us your take on it and what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you guys handled it quite well. I don't have a whole lot else to add. I think it was an unfortunate play for sure. We know that Mark Scheifele is not a dirty player, but he, in the moment, made a split-second decision that I believe he obviously regrets. I mean, you touched on it, Sean. We saw it during the intermission. After seeing that video of Mark Scheifele looking over his shoulder, that was a what did I just do kind of moment, where there was definitely a feeling of remorse shown all over his face, instant remorse. It's one of those things where, I mean, he had been frustrated. I don't, Paul Maurice is entitled to his opinion, but that opinion was defending his player.
He was
Mark Scheifele was frustrated throughout the course of the evening. He's a guy who is highly competitive, but he doesn't generally get involved in scrums unless there's a long line of things that have happened. His reaction to the scrum in front of the net, where he got the lone roughing minor, you could see the frustration there. That was evident for all to see. And obviously, this is a situation where he was ticked off. The Jets had, trying to tie the game up there. There's no doubt about that. He traveled an awfully long distance to complete that hit. And I had a couple buddies were texting me too saying clean play. Well, it was a clean play in 1995. I mean, it's just not a clean play anymore.
That's what Sean said, yeah.
Right. It wasn't a Stevens-esque play, but the player is in a vulnerable position. That's your first tell. Secondly, by the time Scheifele had him directly in his sights, you knew the goal was going to be scored. So there was a conscious decision made to finish the hit. Did Mark Scheifele want to put Jake Evans out on a stretcher? Absolutely not. That's not the type of player he is or the type of person he is. However, it's an unfortunate result, and there will be consequences. We don't know what those consequences will be, but it was a shot that was delivered to the head. It was a shoulder to the head, but that's not allowed anymore either. Mark doesn't finish the hit with his arms, but shoulder to head, when the head is the principal point of contact, is a suspendable offense, and it's just a matter of how many games is he going to get. I did watch a double D. No, I'm sorry. It's a headshot. If the shoulder hits the head, it's a headshot. It's not an elbow. It's not it's charging. It's a headshot. When your shoulder makes contact with someone's chin. You can see the face go
like this, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that's the problem.
And yes, Jake Evans is bent over because he's putting in the puck into the net, but the player needs to adjust his path in that situation.
I agree with you 100%. And I think people who are saying that have a look at the video again. We've looked at it. We don't just come on here and just say things wildly. Like, we analyzed this. We took this down. We looked at this over and over and over again. There is an immediate snapping of the head. I saw someone earlier was disagreeing with me and saying it was whiplash. Well, when you get whiplash, your head goes forward first and it gets thrown backwards. His face immediately snaps to the right. It's the principal point of contact. Yeah, he catches his chest because he's hitting him from his arms, from his elbow up to his shoulder. But his shoulder catches his face. I have no doubt about that. And I was going to bring this up. Sean Barchuk says this. Sean Barchuk was a phenomenal hockey player. He and I ruined our chances of making the Minot Top Guns back in the day because we went and the national slow pitch tournaments were on in Minot, and we ended up going out and having beers till 5 a.m. rather than getting ready to play hockey. couple of idiots we were. But Sean's entirely right. If anyone on here has played hockey with me when I was younger, that I played a heavy style of game. I threw hits. I took predatory hits like that back in those days. But we've covered this earlier in this. That was hockey back in those days. In those days, the mindset of hockey was, this is a tough game. You don't leave yourself open. If you did leave yourself open to the hit, that you deserved what was coming to you. That is how we all felt. And you tried to finish guys and take them out of series. That was hockey back in those days. Sean's entirely right. And I would be guilty of that as anyone playing hockey back in those days. At some point, hockey decided it didn't want to be that anymore. And I'll make the point again. Nick Ehlers isn't playing hockey in the NHL anymore if that's the way the game is played anymore, because a small guy like that is going to get caught time and time again by bigger guys. You start going back to the age of, or the era of guys who are just super big and super strong and can destroy each other, because that's what everyone's trying to do on the ice. The league decided a long time ago, years ago, it doesn't want to be that anymore. These kind of hits want to be out of the game. It's the reason why you don't find a Winnipeg Jet player up there defending the hit. No one is going up there saying, I thought it was a clean hit and this is ridiculous. You don't hear that because they don't think that. And I don't know, maybe there are some people in the room who do think that, but the game has changed, and I just go back to that. Guys, do you have any final thoughts before we head out?
Yeah, I mean, minimum one game, it could be two. I mean, to me, that's where it is at. I know that you said you think it starts at two. I mean,
I think it start. I think if the Jets, if he gets away with two, I think I think the Jets will be lucky to get away with it.
It's a tough precedent, though, for more. And more I've thought about that, it's like, I mean, we watched the Tom Wilson hit. We all saw it. He got nothing, right? And that's, so this is where, like, the problem becomes, is it's so hard to speculate, and that's what we do after this. It's very difficult to speculate on a hit like this, right? I mean, it looks terrible. The result of it is terrible. Mark Scheifele is not that type of player, though. You know, we know that, right? Mark Scheifele is one of the cleanest guys, I would say, in the league. I mean, he complains a lot about penalties, but I've never seen Mark Scheifele truck a guy like that in my life, right? I've never seen him do that. And so that's part of the problem. But you have to separate Mark Scheifele from the hit itself, right? Because it's not always about, well, and here's the thing, the Tom Wilson thing's a problem too. But the problem is, like, you have to try and separate the two, and it's very difficult. I understand that, because two things can be true, and I said this at the top of the show. You can have a clean player, a good, that type of player, and that player can also make a bad hit from time to time. We see this all the time. Guys don't get, and this may be part of why I'm kind of thinking maybe it is only 1 to 2 games because of that. But I think, I mean, that was a tough result from that hit, and that's the other thing. And the last thing I'll say, it was nice to see fans in this building for once. I know this is a divisive topic for some. It was great to see nurses and healthcare workers and all that kind of thing with smiles on their faces. These people have busted their butts saving lives over the last 15 months. So yeah, I just wanted to give kind of shout out to the healthcare workers that were in the building tonight, because it's been a tough job for them, tougher than most people in this province. And yeah, it was nice just to see people smiling again. So
yeah.
And one last one here too. Sorry, just for people saying that Evans shouldn't. The only way for Jake Evans to score is to go down and put in the backhand. He's trying to win the game. If Mark Scheifele is trying to win the game, he poke checks Jake Evans. He doesn't rock him. I'm sorry, there is no other part of that discussion.
Yeah, guys, that's the most devastating hit I've ever seen live before. Like, go back before that, I think the biggest one I'd seen before that was Byfuglien on Mark Stone. That was, to me, we saw it live. Ken, we were socially distanced across the aisle from each other, but the sound, I don't know if you had it for me, but the sound that you made, the sound that on the ice, but the sound of the reaction of the people in the building listening to that was like, if you heard what that sounded like, you get a good idea and an understanding of like just how devastating that was. That was tough. Anyways, we got to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you sticking around till midnight again. We want to make sure we give you value, so we gave you an extra 15 minutes. I wanted to go back to the song that we brought up there, Ken, from Tristan Rivers. It was awesome to play it. We'll be playing that every time Ken hops on going forward. And I wanted to end the show because Tristan Rivers, like I said, it's not the first thing he's done. I'm not wearing the headband, so I didn't want to play it earlier because we've got an entry headband music. But I wanted to show everyone the video. A really talented guy by the name of Niels Britz. If you've seen the Hellebuyck videos that Sportsnet puts online, they're animated. They're animated by an animator here in Winnipeg by the name of Niels Britz. I pitched him for the concept, and he decided to do the Sean's headband video for us to throw into the show. So the next time that you see me wearing the headband, I'm going to be playing this, but in the meantime, let's close the show out with it. This is the Sean's headband video.
Whoa, hang on. We got to tell people when our show is tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. 3 o'clock? Is that what you said?
Yeah, 3 o'clock. Our normal Friday morning show is going to be moved because Jets game 2 is obviously Friday, and the morning skate, there'll be a conflict. So tomorrow we have a couple of great guests coming on. Kelly Rudy is going to join us, and Mike Zeisberger from NHL.com.
Oh, Zeiss.
We'll
We're
come
having
back
Zeiss
because we had to cut his last appearance short because of some technical difficulties.
Zeiss couldn't figure out his technical difficulties, so we talked about getting the vaccine for 20 minutes. It was great. Anyway, let's shut it down here. This is the Sean's Headband song. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock for the long form Kenny and Renny. But this is the Sean's Headband song. Thanks for joining us. We will see you tomorrow.